Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the EcoFlow RIVER Pro portable power station, and the really interesting thing about this unit is it's expandable. So there's an external battery that doubles its power to 1,440 watt hours. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this unit compared to a wide range of solar generators that I own and let you know how they stack up. When EcoFlow offered me a review unit, I was very excited. This is something I've wanted to look at for a long time. Now, EcoFlow is a fairly new company, and they seem to be focused on really high quality design and bringing some innovative features. The River Pro is its latest mid-size solar generator, and it has a street price of $650. And there's three primary features that are really interesting here. First of all, the X-Boost technology, which claims to make this 600 watt inverter in this thing handle up to 1200 or even 1800 watt appliances. The second feature is their X-Stream technology for really fast charging. They claim this thing can charge at over 600 watts, which is an amazingly fast charger. And the third, and I think most interesting thing, is it has an extra battery. So this extra battery runs $400, and this doubles the capacity of this unit. And unlike the Goal Zero products, this is the same lithium ion battery technology as the main unit. It does not use lead acid. So together, these three features really set this apart, and I really wanted to dive in and find out how well they really work. Does this live up to the hype? Let's find out. So initial impressions of the River Pro is this is a really nice looking solar generator. It's really stylish and it's quite lightweight. It only comes in at 16.8 pounds and it's really compact. I would say it's comparable to, say, a Yeti 500X. You can easily carry this one-handed with a nice handle built into the top. Overall, the enclosure is made out of plastic, but it seems like high quality plastic. It does seem to be a little bit of a fingerprint magnet, but I really like the design of this thing. It's definitely one of the most stylish options out there in the market. Let's take a look at the display first. So in the left-hand side, it tells you how many hours are remaining. The center tells you the state of charge, including the percentage, which is great, as well as details on the input and output wattage. And there's a number of indicators at the bottom that tell you whether it's connected to Wi-Fi and whether certain ports are on or off. So I really like this display. It's really smartly designed, and it's a breath of fresh air compared to the Bluetti displays that are really lacking in information. On the DC output side of things, it has an automotive output for your cigarette lighter appliances and two barrel connectors. The car output is regulated at 13.6 volts, which is great, and can put out up to 10 amps or 136 watts. They also include a nice barrel connector cable. On the USB side of things, this has a 100 watt USB-C with power delivery, which is very impressive, and 3 USB-A ports, one of them being a fast charge port, capable of 15 watts of output. So I wanted to try the USB-C with my MacBook Pro 15-inch. You can see when you plug it in, there's an indicator on the screen that you are using the USB-C output. And this thing did a really great job with my MacBook. I was able to get a solid 95 watts out of this, which is close enough to 100 watts to call it a really solid, powerful USB output. So far, I've never tested a solar generator with such a strong USB-C output. This will power pretty much anything you can throw at it. While the MacBook Pro is plugged in, I figured I'd go ahead and plug in my iPad Pro, this B&O Bluetooth speaker, and this Anker power bank on the other USB-A outputs just to see if I could get a lot of power out of this thing. And I could easily get well over 100 watts. I think I got over 110 watts total. And so, yeah, this thing can handle 4 USB outputs simultaneously and output a lot of power. So if you're looking for a solar generator that can run a laptop, or a bunch of USB appliances, this would be one to really take a hard look at because it's really rock solid. To the left of the display is a built-in flashlight or lantern that has a low, high, and blinking mode. Seems to work fairly well. Has a nice clean light. Around the right-hand side of the unit, there is the AC output side of things. And there are 3 120 volt outlets on this thing. According to the specs, it's rated at 600 watts continuous pure sine wave, 1200 watts peak. But then there is the X-Boost technology in here, and according to the marketing materials, it can power devices up to 1800 watts with X-Boost mode on. And so it's hard to say, what exactly can this handle? But fear not, in this video we're going to be going really deep on this technology and finding out exactly how it works and if it works. Above the AC outputs there is a fan to pull air through the enclosure, and at the bottom there is the expansion port behind this little protective cover, and this allows you to hook up the external battery if you have one, and I do. At the top there is a really comfortable handle. This unit is super easy to carry one-handed. On the other side of the enclosure is all of the input side of things. So we have our Extreme input and we have our solar and car input. If we open up the protective cover, you can see the left-hand charging port, and all you get for this is a standard electrical cable. That's right, folks. There is no wall wart for this thing. There is no external charger. It's all built in, which is pretty amazing. So all you have to do is plug it into the wall and plug the other side into the AC input. And look at this thing. Now, you'll remember in my old video, I chained together 4 Goal Zero Yeti chargers to get 200 watts of charging, and this thing just keeps going. That's right, 622 watts of input. Now remember, this is a 740 watt hour unit, so we're charging at like 0.9 C. So we're slamming a whole lot of electrons into this unit really quickly. There will be some implications for battery life, and I'll get to that a little bit later on. But this thing works exactly as advertised. Now, EcoFlow claims that you can get this to 80% in an hour and fully charged in an hour and a half. However, I was able to get it to 90% in an hour and fully charged in an hour and a half. So this thing actually beat the specs on the website. The AC charging on this thing is absolutely amazing. The fact there's not an extra wall charger and it's this fast is just really a joy to use. Totally changes how you use the product. In the middle is a circuit breaker in case things trip. The top right screw is actually for grounding. And then there is the XT60 input for both solar and car charging. They include a really high quality cable for charging with solar with the MC4 connectors. These are fairly heavy gauge wires considering. These are much better than what I would expect as a packed in cable. And so I really like this system of XT60, even though it's not quite as compatible with all my Goal Zero accessories. And this is the car charging cable. And both of these have this handy little cable management Velcro strap on them as well. And it's all concealed behind this door, which, you know, is nice in theory. I'm a little afraid this is a little flimsy and could eventually break. EcoFlow offers a 2-year warranty on the unit, which is fairly standard for the industry. It also comes with a manual that's written in really well-crafted English in full color and is fairly detailed, so that's a really nice feature. Overall, I really like the design of the River Pro. The organization of the ports, the quality handle, the really nice rubber feet on the bottom. It's just a really solidly designed unit. I think that's something that this company seems to take pride in, is good design. So if that's something that you appreciate, this is definitely the unit for you. But really, we're all here for the main event, right? We want to see how this extra battery really works with the unit. So EcoFlow provides this for $400, and so you're overall in for $1,050 between the two units. And the external battery is essentially the same footprint as the River Pro. It's just a little bit shorter because it doesn't have all the additional electronics in it. This weighs 0.8 of a pound less than the River Pro, coming in at 16 pounds. And interestingly, the enclosure for the extra battery is actually made out of extruded aluminum. So the front, back, and sides are all one continuous piece of aluminum, like a Goal Zero Yeti, with just the top and bottom being plastic. Both sides have fans for really nice cooling, and along top there's a single power button and a multi-segment power meter. Around the backside, there is a cover over the expansion port input. So let's talk about connecting these. We're basically connecting from the main unit to the battery unit, and to do that we're going to use this included cable that comes with the extra battery. It sort of looks like an overgrown serial cable, and it has a male and a female side, so you got to make sure that you're using the right end. And so the male end goes into the main unit, and the female side goes into the extra battery. And both ends of the cable have 2 thumb screws, and that's used to keep the cable in place. And you really need to do this because the cable is extremely stiff and will definitely pull itself out if you don't screw these things down. Once connected, it's as simple as turning on the external battery, turning on the River Pro, and the screen will immediately indicate that the two are linked, and the total percentage charge will be recalculated based on the state of charge of both of the batteries. When I first started looking at the product information for these, I was curious how they were actually going to look when you hook them together because of the arrangement of where the ports are and the combination of this cable being fairly thick and stiff. And well, I'll tell you this, I tried pretty much everything I could think of, and they're all a little awkward. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if the length of this cable is optimized so that you could put the River Pro on a table and put the expansion battery on the floor, because yes, that does work. But if you put them on the same surface, you end up with this really long coil of wire, and well, I'm not really sure what to do with it, to be honest. I think that they could have come up with something maybe a little bit better, or at least something more optimized for putting the two units close to each other. The best I could do is to do a coil, use a little bit of Velcro, and that allows them to be at least snugged up close together without a ton of cable popping out everywhere. If you come up with a better solution, let me know in the comments. Oh, and by the way, I did test how long it would take to charge both the external battery and the River Pro connected together from 0%. And well, there are no surprises at all. It took exactly double the amount of time that it took the single unit. That's right. 2 hours to get to 90% and 3 hours to get to 100%. That's so impressive. All right, so we've covered the 3 major features, but there's one more that I think is actually really impressive. So on the front of the unit, there's this button that lets you pair to the unit with Wi-Fi. And there's a really nice EcoFlow app you can download for free in the App Store. And it's essentially very similar in concept to the app for the Goal Zero Yetis. It allows you to see the current input and output power, the state of charge, turn on and off the AC and DC plugs, as well as the light, and do a number of settings that aren't really available on the unit itself as far as controlling things about the AC and other preferences. The X Boost is controlled inside the AC section. You can turn it on and off from there. Underneath battery, you can adjust what the state of charge should be so that you can say, I only want this to charge to 80% to prolong the life. And under system, you can control things like the standby time, the LCD turn off time, temperature units. And I think the thing here that's most interesting is the quiet charging feature. What that essentially does is it turns off that high speed charging. So instead of charging at 620 watts, you'll be charging closer to 100 watts. And if you're not in a hurry, I would strongly recommend doing that because you'll get a much higher cycle count out of this unit if you don't charge it so aggressively. So using my handy heat gun, we're going to test this inverter to its limits. So first of all, I wanted to shut off X boost and just see what the inverter could do by itself. And the beauty of the heat gun is it does have a dial on it, so that's why you see a lot of people testing with these things. You can really very slowly ramp up the power and see where things break. So we're going for maximum output here, and at 400 watts. And you'll notice if you look at the display behind, you'll notice it jumps around a lot. So like a lot of other units, I feel like the AC output is not super accurate on the front of the unit. That's why I'm using this meter. And so now we're at 800 watts, so we're beyond the 600 watts. Nominal here, it's still going strong. And then as I started creeping up to 1000 watts, well, I think we hit the limits here. The overload started to blink and it pretty quickly shut down after that, after just a couple seconds. And the meter tells me that we were able to get a peak output of 1030 watts out of this thing. So it's a little shy of the 1200 watts peak, but I tested it a few times and ended up with fairly similar results. In my experience, this thing could very solidly run something in the 600, 700, and even 750 watt range pretty much indefinitely. However, it was pretty reliably going to shut down when you hit 1000 watts. So I think on the nominal rating, they say it's 600 watts. I would actually say this is very comfortably 700 or 750 watts of output, which is great. So it overperformed its rating. But I think on the peak side of things, without X boost on, this thing does shut down closer to 1000 watts. I also wanted to test a few things around the house. And so I have my whole setup here for running my fridge from a generator. So I took that plug and flipped over my fridge to use that generator circuit. And surprisingly, I was able to run my full-size fridge for hours and hours, no problem at all. And with something like a mixer, this was able to go full power, no problems whatsoever. The motor seemed very, very happy. And the last test, which a lot of things fail at, is the coffee machine. So we have an espresso machine. I didn't think this little solar generator could handle it, but surprisingly, it did. I was able to make a few coffees on this thing, no problem at all. So far, this thing worked really well with X boost off, but it did have hard limits. Anything over 1000 watts would cause it to trip. And when I started testing this with my small Vornado space heater, it would overload. Even on low, it could not handle this load. And this, I think, is exactly the reason why X boost exists. So essentially, it lets you use an appliance that would normally 100% trip the breakers on this thing, but in a limited capacity. As soon as I turned X boost on, I was able to turn the space heater on in low, and it worked fine. It pulled about 600 watts. So I went ahead and put it on high, and it actually used 580 watts or 590 watts. But I did notice that the heater didn't work quite the same way. So on low, it seemed to work generally okay, pretty similar to normal. On high, what it did is the fan speed really dropped quite a bit. And it got me wondering, what the heck is going on here? So I switched over to voltage mode on my meter and started turning up the heater. And as soon as I did that with X boost on, you see the voltage dropped a lot. It went from 120 volts to 78. And I repeated the test with my heat gun and I got very similar results. And in fact, the higher I turned up the heat gun, I was able to get the voltage to drop almost all the way to 60 volts. That's half the voltage this appliance needs to run. Now it did still run, but it was running very, very slowly. I was getting heat and it was working. It wasn't tripping the overload. But at what cost? I think by changing the voltage this much, you could probably damage certain kinds of sensitive equipment. So I would say use this in an emergency and only use it for things like resistive heat. So my recommendation is to just leave X-Boost off on your River Pro and only turn it on if you need it. That way you know you have clean 120 volt power all the time. And next up, I wanted to see the capacity of the battery. How much power can you pull through AC at a relatively light load? So to do this, I dialed in the power to about 150 watts, which means that this will discharge this 740 watt hour battery in about 5 hours. And when I did this test with the Goal Zero and Bluetti units, I got about 80% of the rated power through AC. With this unit, well, I got 541 watt hours, which is 75% of the rated output. Now that could be because they actually hold more battery in reserve, or that the inverter isn't quite as efficient. So I would say it's an okay, but not great result. So that was for the River Pro by itself. Let's see how it performs with the external battery. So I charged both of them back up to 100% and did the same exact output test. And in this case, I had the output be about 250 watts because we have a much larger battery here that we're testing. And I got 1,128 watt hours, which is 78% of the rated power, so a little bit better. One thing I wanted to test too is how is the power drawn when you have both of these connected? And what I found out is if I started with both of these at 100% and apply a load, the River Pro actually fully discharges before it starts dipping into the external battery. I had assumed it would be the opposite and it would drain the external battery first, but that's how it works. All right, so let's take a look at DC charging, and we'll start with solar. As always, I'm always testing this on a very, very cloudy day because it's always cloudy. Now, in this case, the River Pro can only handle 25 volts of solar input. So I have these three 100 watt panels, and I'm using these parallel connectors to connect 3 of them in parallel and stay at 25 volts, but be able to put up to 300 watts into this. And so I was very curious to see, because this is technically over the limits that this is designed for. Because according to the specs, this thing can only handle 12 amps or 200 watts. So what happens when you plug 300 watts of solar panels into the unit? Is it going to start on fire? Is it going to trip an overload? All right, so there you go. The answer is essentially if you put 300 watts of solar panels in there, it will limit itself to 200 watts. It won't overload, no problems at all. It just takes what it needs. And to confirm that, I used the Bluetti EB150 that can definitely handle more solar input, and was able to confirm with the same conditions I got 220 watts. So it does limit to 200 watts. 25 volts, but it works really well. And the other way you can charge your River Pro is through the included car charging cable. So one side plugs into the unit, the other into the standard cigarette lighter. And as part of my test rig, I just have this lithium iron phosphate battery that sort of is a proxy for my car. And I plug that in, and let's see if it works. Now, this does not always work with different chargers. The Bluetti can't handle this kind of scenario at all. And with this, I got an even 100 watts of DC input. That got me thinking, could I use other solar generators as a source for this? Now, this, again, doesn't really work that well. I've tried this in the past on other videos. So I tried my Goal Zero Yeti 1000, plugged the cable into the DC output, and yet again, I got basically 100 watts, 91 in this case. And that's probably because the Goal Zero has an unregulated DC output. If I use this cable, I get a full 100 watts. It's kind of a shame you need to use it at all, but that's Goal Zero for you. And just for fun, I thought I'd try this with some other units. So plugging this into the Bluetti EB150 worked like a charm. Got a full 100 watts out of that. So then I figured I'd try the Bluetti AC50, which is a significantly smaller unit with a slightly weaker DC output. And guess what? That also worked great. So you're probably wondering, why am I even doing this? What's the point of these kinds of tests? And long story short, charging a lithium-based solar generator can be really tricky in a car environment because of the lower internal resistance of a lithium battery. It can pull a lot of current really quickly. And what this is proving is that there are internal electronics to limit this to only 100 watts of draw, which should be very safe for pretty much any car situation. So far this is the best and safest car charging setup I've seen. So how does the River Pro stack up against some of these other solar generators that I've tested? Well, it's kind of a tricky one because this one sits exactly in between what I'd consider a mid-size solar generator, like the Bluetti AC50 or AC50S, and a quote-unquote full-size solar generator like the Goal Zero Yeti 1000 and the Bluetti EB150. If you're in the market for a mid-size solar generator like the Jackery 500, the Bluetti AC50 or AC50S now is a really good choice. It's very inexpensive. This is $430 on sale right now. It normally sells for $500. The River Pro again is $650. The interesting thing about the River Pro though is it's roughly the same size and weight as this, but it has a 50% larger battery. The inverter is twice as fast. The wall charging is 6 times faster. And the USB-C output is 100 watts versus 45. So the only thing the Bluetti has on this thing is price and the wireless charging. So how does the River Pro compare to a full-size solar generator like the EB150? So in this case, I think it's only fair to add the expansion battery to the River Pro. So together, those again cost $1,050. The Bluetti EB150, which I consider the best value right now on sale, is $1,300. So the River Pro is cheaper. And the only thing that the Bluetti has in terms of specs that are better is it has a very slightly larger battery at 1500 watt hours versus 1440, and it uses higher quality LG pouch cells that have a higher cycle count. But otherwise, the River Pro has this thing beat. It has a USB-C that's twice as powerful. It has a car charger included, and that's not even possible with the Bluetti. And the wall charger is 3 times faster. And let's not forget that the display on the EcoFlow is significantly better than the Bluetti. And lastly, compared to my Yeti 1000 lithium, well, this thing has it beat pretty much in every area. Obviously on price, it's significantly cheaper. It has a regulated DC output and MPPT charging built in, neither of which the Yeti has. The wall charging is like 7 or 8 times faster than the Yeti. And it also has a much larger capacity at 1440 watt hours versus 1000 watt hours. The Yeti also requires a special car charging cable that will set you back an additional $40 and doesn't honestly work as well as the built-in one in the River Pro. The big advantage, of course, with the Yetis is the inverter is probably double or even triple the capacity of the River Pros. I came away quite impressed with the EcoFlow River Pro. I didn't think I'd like it as much as I did, and I think the real kicker here is this combines the value that you get with something like Bluetti with the higher quality design and construction that I would normally associate with Goal Zero. So it's the 1-2 punch of being a really good value and a really great design. And even though it does have an expandable battery that gives it a capacity of 1440 watt hours, I still think this is generally, inverter-wise, a mid-sized solar generator. If this had a much stronger inverter that maybe could handle up to 1500 watts, this thing would be the perfect package. The only other nit I have is the expansion port and cable on this is a little awkward. It's just a little too long and a little too stiff, and I really can't figure out the best way to arrange these units. In some ways, I wish the expansion battery stacked like some of the previous generations of EcoFlow products, but you know, all of these are nitpicks. The expansion battery works as advertised. The super fast wall charger at over 600 watts works amazingly well. The X-Boost is available, although it's a feature I'm probably not going to use very much. And overall, I really like it. It's a great value, it's a great package, and I strongly recommend it. I'm actually looking forward to maybe reviewing the Delta next. All right, everyone, that's it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please leave a comment below. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing lots more reviews. Thanks for watching, everyone.